So good morning, friends. Welcome to the next edition of the VDMA Fireside Chat with the experts. Our topic for discussion today is Atmanirbhar Bharat, significance for the MSME sector. And our industry expert joining us today is Mr. Sanjeebit Choudhury. Sanjeebit is currently the Vice President, Asia Pacific for Weiss GmbH and CEO of the Weiss Automation Solution India. He's responsible for Weiss Asia Business and Development, Weiss Group Asian manufacturing footprint in the region. Now, besides India, the other Weiss subsidiaries he's responsible and is in the board of are Weiss Singapore, Southeast Asia, Weiss Korea, as well as Weiss Japan. Before Weiss, Sanjeebit worked with ABS SKF Group Sweden for over 30 years, including 12 years of international assignment in senior management positions, both in Italy and China. He was also located in Shanghai. So Sanjeebit, pleasure welcoming you for the second edition of the VDMA Fireside Chat with Experts. And as you know, our topic today is Atmanirbhar Bharat and the significance for the MSME sector. Sanjeevit, coming to the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, now Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyaan or Self-reliant India campaign is the vision of the new India envisaged by our Honourable Prime Minister. In fact, a special economic and comprehensive package of 1.46 trillion rupees or roughly around $20 billion, which is equivalent to 10% of India's GDP, has been envisaged for this project. The aim is to make the country self-reliant in all aspects. So Sanjeevit, when we look at Atmanirbhar Bharat, certainly it is to help the development of the manufacturing industry in India. Now, MSME, Sanjeevit, form the backbone of our industry. We have more than 63 million, in fact 63.4 million MSMEs in India. Now, in your opinion, Sanjeevit, what are the three main challenges that MSMEs face in India?
Thank you for your kind words of introduction, Rajesh. And it's always been a pleasure to talk to you and through VDMA. It's a really pleasurable experience interacting, a lot of learnings. And I really appreciate to have this chat opportunity with you in your series of fireside chats. And I watched the previous one, especially with the VDMA, which was a lot of tips for me. But also thanks for choosing me for a topic which is very close to my heart. The topic is MSME development, and why it is so, because I have witnessed and experienced closely that what a well-established and structured MSME ecosystem can contribute to a country's development. First, during my 4 years in Italy, as you know, Italy is it's primarily a MSME economy. There are very hardly few, if you leave out those erstwhile Fiat and all. There's not many large organizations, but they are very successful. And the second was 7 years in China, when I reached in a time when the China was in a really high roller coaster. They were really going up and up, and I could see and witness. It's a long enough time, 7 years, for me to see that how the MSMEs have developed and what they have contributed to the China's super economic power. But and now for the last 3 years, being part of a 50-year-old German Mittelstand engineering company, which is which is really led by a second generation and owner CEO, Mr. Weiss, who itself is passionate about the MSME development across the world, because he believes in Mittelstand, the MSME, and he thinks it can contribute to any economy in any country. And I too subscribe to his vision And we have a good understanding, and rather many of the development we take into that. Coming to first question, it's, I think, Rajesh, you have really put it in so many words that MSMEs are the backbone of Indian industry. But before taking to your question of the challenges, I think let's look at a few data points to put the things in the right context. If you look at IBF or even SME Chamber of Data, at SME Chamber of India, the data points. I mean, the MSME sector contributes to roughly, they say, 7 to 8% of the GDP, but MSMEs also contributes to 30% plus to services. And surprisingly, many people may not probably take note of it. It contributes to 45% of the industrial production and 40% of the exports. It's a sizable number. The total contribution of MSMEs to GDP is around 37.5%. And not to forget that MSME is the second largest employment provider, just next after agriculture, employs over 12 crore workers. If I can remember the data said by the MSME minister recently in the Rajya Sabha, as you said, the numbers of 6.3 crores or 63 million MSMEs. But even if you go by the registered MSMEs, there are 25 lakhs plus. But dominated primarily 22 lakhs out of that are micro enterprises, and the small enterprises are only 2.95 or 3 lakhs, and mid sizes are around 10,000, 11,000 units. But interesting fact he quoted is that what is heartening to see is probably the context we can find later part of in our discussion is the number of MSMEs increase at 18.5% from 2029 to 2022. This is the IBF data. So that's heartening. So that means whatever you call the Atma Nirbhar or the policy push or even the PLI schemes are showing ground results. The optimism and I could see that. This is just a data point to put before we come. But as you said, there are actually maybe 6.3 crores or 63 million MSMEs, but 99.4 are micro enterprises. So and only a 0.5% or 3.3 lakhs are medium, and a meager 0.007% or 5,000 are medium enterprises. This context is extremely important for whatever we talk about MSME sector. This is the underlying fact I would like to see. But the key another data point which we cannot forget, 60% of the 63 million MSMEs are rural based. They are based in the rural areas. I mean, so the context of challenge when you talk about it, I think these points we should keep in our back of mind, and which will set the context in any discussion you take it forward. This will be the underlying fact. So let me take the three challenges which comes on the top of my mind to my limited interactions, and plus also the passion for the subject matter keeps me tracking the industry and talking to a few people who matter, so who have shared the similar passion. I mean, to the twilight of my career, I think this is what I think personally one can contribute, having coming from large organizations, you can translate to that. So for me, the first one comes, Rajesh, is the limited capital and the knowledge of the accessibility to the financing. So both in terms of absence of adequate and timely banking finance and the lack of access to the working capital. So if you look at a recent report by the International Finance Corporation, which is a part of the World Bank, the India's formal banking system can only supply 11 lakhs crores of credit lines to MSME need, which is only 1/3 of the total demand from the sector. I mean, this data, one cannot ignore it. 1/3 only the formal banking system. Just imagine where the rest of the working capital or the financing needs flows into the industry. So second challenge for me is the low production capacity, which essentially, if you say, can relate to the poor productivity from the, you can say, the inefficient processes and the unskilled workforce. So if you talk about that, while MSME sector employs the large section of the non-farming sector in our country, most of these MSMEs hire surprisingly fewer than 5 workers. It's an unbelievable figure, but these are data points which is authenticated from validated sources. One can question, but with the World Bank pegging this number to really that 96% of all MSIs falls into this category. So that means if I take the last, if I can summarize, 99% MSMEs have less than 10 workers. And if you look at the one of the OECD, this Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development shows that the productivity levels of the medium firms and those firms which hire typically 50 to 250 people are around 80 to 100% greater than the productivity of micro firms. See the correlation.
Yes.
And I mean, the World Bank report also shows that India, the average number of employees, a very, I couldn't believe it when I read this figure, but it's a World Bank report says that the average number of employees for a 40-year-old plant is almost the same as for its 5-year-old counterpart. So there's not much of change has happened. And we know that being I am groom, and most part of my career I've spent with the manufacturing. The manufacturing inefficiencies are inherent in structurally. It's inherently structural, the manufacturing inefficiency. The main challenge lies in the controlling the high operational cost, including the in India specific called compliance cost. Read between the line. Legitimate and illegitimate, I don't want to get into that discussion, but the compliance cost for when you have 90% micro industries, you can understand, read between the lines. The competitiveness also gets dented without any good reforms yet to be seen on the ground in the reduction of input cost, poor quality of the powers, exorbitant logistic cost, distorted credit access for the MSMEs as we spoke, and low labor productivity primarily coming out the unskilled labor, and last one I would say that is abysmal research and development assistance to this segment when you have 90% to that. So having talked about the first two, limited working capital and the capital and working capital and finance, low productivity, the third challenge I see, I think this is what is the crux, and is the lack of access to technology and very ineffective marketing infrastructure, which is, you can't undermine this. The traditional inefficient methods of operating business and the low rate of technology adoption has really hindered this smaller business to achieve their potential. Good intentions, good even those technical skill, good even capital, but these are the things hindered to they really can't reach their potential. In fact, I was reading a Google research with collaboration with the KPMG. Very interesting fact, Rajesh. It comes out that the study reveals that 68% of the 51 million SMEs are not connected to the internet.
Oh, that's a huge number. Yes.
The study also found that the digitization of the SMEs could expand their contribution to GDP by 10 percentage point. Very interesting fact. Look at the policy makers or the industry bodies. It's a very interesting fact throws up. That means if this digitization can take 10% of GDP, that means pushing it to the 46-48% by 2022 from 37% today, the MSMEs to 46-48. It's a very, I mean, of course, I will not go, but online marketplace for MSCs announced, providing branding and promotion support to enhance the market visibility. But we need to see some ground impact, something like. But I think with the Make in India agenda, the MSMEs will let the MSMEs. I would sincerely hope let these MSMEs get access to such resources, such as. I mean, it sounds very big, but they are not privy to the large ones like access to design studios, innovation labs, strengthening of the standards and the quality infrastructure. It cannot be the privy to the privileged ones who anyway have them and they can afford it or they can access it. I think these are the three challenges I see. I don't know if I put it right perspective, what you're looking for, but to my mind, it comes this.
I think, thank you, Sanjeebit. That was really very insightful, especially the statistics you shared, and then how you correlated that with the MSME. And I think very aptly you mentioned these 3 points: limited capital as well as knowledge, low production capacity, capability, compliance costs, and lack of R&D spendings by the MSME. And I think was very interesting. You mentioned 68% of MSMEs are not connected to the internet. I think this is really an amazing figure, or what nobody realized till now. And I really am very grateful for these insights. And I think even our viewers would really benefit from the insights you've shared today on the MSME sector, Sanjeebit. Sanjeebit, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, now we can call it's a part of Make in India 2.0. When Make in India first came up, the concept or the aim was to increase the GDP in manufacturing to bring it to about 25% by 2022 initially, then we were speaking about 2025. However, if we look at the period Make in India 1.0 was announced, or Make in India was announced, Sanjay, to today, actually in these 4 to 5 years, unfortunately, GDP in manufacturing has more or less remained stagnant in this range of 15 to 16 or max 17%. So my question to you is, Sanjay, the last 6 years we have really not been able to increase the GDP. Now, what new can Atmanirbhar Bharat, or how can this really suddenly help to give a push to the GDP contribution by the manufacturing sector?
Good question, Rajesh, but a million dollar one. Especially under the current uncertain environment, business environment, and the unpredictable business outlook. Let me attempt it. Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's vital to understand the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat. As I understood and I look at it, the key element here is to need to create an ecosystem that will allow the Indian companies and especially the manufacturing value chain to be globally competitive and thereby making India self-reliant. This is, to me, is the crux of the Atmanirbhar, because any policies has got an intent, and for me, this is the crux of the things. But the way to realize this aim of what you said, the 5 trillion Indian economy, and currently is probably, I don't know with the recent data, but it's the last one, the data is 2.9 million. I think is to increase the speed of and the scale of investments so as to make the manufacturing sector at least grow in double digit on a sustained basis. You told that 5-6 years honestly has not been really growing. The intent was there 1.0 in Make in India, and currently if you look at the data, it's really showing that Rajesh is 3 to 4% growth in recent times. So for me, some steps have taken. If you talk about availability capital, if you're talking of the scaling up and the speed up of the investments, I think the funds of funds for me is a good initiative. Matter of fact, one can debate about how much it has been rolled out in, and the efficiency and the adequacy is there, but then efficiency and the addressing the right sector or not, but the corpus of a 50,000 crore for MSMEs is a substantial amount. So that if you talk about funds per fund, and the objective of the fund is definitely is to infuse the equity to help the MSEs to expand the growth. While the government is likely to contribute around 10,000 crore, while other institutions like your SBI and LIC are likely to fund the remaining amount. This fund, which will operate through a kind of a mother fund and few other daughter funds, which also will help the primary one of the aim, if I understand, if I read through it, is MSMEs to get listed on the main broad stock exchanges. The availability or accessibility to the broader finance through the stock markets. That's one of the aim to try and get it. So I think through the PLI, though the PLI scheme is announced, is growth oriented, it requires constant nurturing so that its effective execution is assured. But simultaneously, I think core competence, cost effectiveness, and the governance standards needs to be strengthened, coupled with one important part, imbibing the cutting edge technology. And of course, the additional advantage definitely through this could be attained by being a cost competitive, which is the crux of the things to create the more demand. I mean, that's what I could think about it. I think we are there. I'm sure 2.0 has some lot of other elements, but for me, the funds of funds and the PLI schemes are one. Surely, the timing is probably this COVID of a 1 year uncertainties, maybe putting few roadblocks or slow down, but I'm sure the base is there.
Absolutely. Even, in fact, I would also echo your thoughts, Sanjeebit. I think what is important is that the government has set a roadmap. Whether we achieve it 2 years, or 3 years later, I think that is not so important, but at least a roadmap, a clear vision has been put forth by the government. And now the industry also knows what are the possibilities available. And I think this is very correctly mentioned by you. In fact, coming to the one of the important points you highlighted or touched upon, Sanjeebit, is the PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme,
Yes.
which actually is one of the strong proponents or components of this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyaan. Now, if we look at the PLI scheme, Sanjeebit, it is actually based on providing incentives on incremental growth. Now, here is what I would like to ask you, Sanjeebit, because we are talking about incremental growth. Now, the base year in many cases has been taken as 2019-20, or in some of the schemes which are coming up now, 2021. But unfortunately, because of the COVID, we are, as it is, struggling. First, we were struggling for supply, now we are struggling for demand. So this incremental growth on which the whole scheme is based would be quite a challenge for the companies to attain. So would this scheme then ultimately be successful? Because this year, I think most of the companies, I very much doubt how many would actually be able to attain incremental growth now because of the second wave. So what is your take, Sanjeebit? How would this PLI scheme ultimately benefit them?
I think, Rajesh, I may not be able to cover the entire spectrum, but I could see. I'm an optimistic guy. I look for positive hints always by nature, and let me take few pointers if and some specific segments which I have been tracking, which is probably apt for MSME or their player. They can play a major role, and how that will augment the demand, because end of the day, that's what it matters. What incremental growth is not come from the skies. So, I mean, let's look at the first policy strong announcement, because that's the part of the government which plays their role. Like one, I can quote to you, like the government has announced the global tenders to be disallowed up to 200 crores in the government and the PSU sector. That surely can boost and channel the demands to MSME. It's for sure. That is one of the things. Few other segments that may benefit MSMEs under the PLI scheme. I think if I can take 2 or 3 sectors for our discussion reference point, one clearly comes to my mind is the electronics manufacturing. The PLI scheme for the large scale also the PLI scheme for the large scales is there, but it also focuses on building a vibrant and a robust electronic component manufacturing ecosystem. In fact, LCNA, the industry body for the electronic manufacturing and the industry, they have requested the government to either introduce a new PLI scheme or widen the ambit of the existing schemes to support the investment in the component, which require a lower capital investment threshold and the production target. So that's the industry body is pushing, and the right industry body. I'm sure it's a matter of time before we see some surely fine tuning of those schemes. The second I would talk about is not so. It happened through a friend who is passionate about this industry as solar PV modules. We have a great future there. The manufacturers here will be incentivized for higher efficiency and also for sourcing the materials from the domestic market. I mean, that's the underlying fact if you look at the policy document. And this is likely to augment the entire solar PV manufacturing ecosystem, including the boost to the ancillary units, and which are primarily are MSME driven. So electronics and the solar PV module, which I can, but I'm very upbeat about another. You can say my soft spot in my heart is the food products. Let's take about the food processing industry. It's one of the largest industry in India. In fact, India is the 5th in terms of production, consumption, and export and expected growth. This industry, it provides. I mean, in fact, it's a vital linkage between the industry and the agriculture. And it's got an enormous significance in the India's development, which to my understanding and my view, it's still very untapped by the both government, industry bodies, or you can take a policy framework and the execution both sides. With India moving now with the 6th successive good monsoon, the position India is moving from a position of scarcity to surplus food production. The prospect of increasing processing levels are very enormous. In fact, the food industry output in India is expected to reach 535 billion by 2025 and 26. It's a substantial number for the industry size. But if I can take in the food processing, in the value-added marine products, we've got a huge coastline, and for example, the canned, battered, or the breaded, pickled sausages, and the role of contract manufacturing has been recognized under the scheme and the PLI, and the scheme provides that investment criteria to be met by the food majors and the contract manufacturers jointly. So the scheme provides for that. So it recognized the fact that you need a ancillary and the backward integration of the small MSME. The role of contract manufacturing has been recognized under the scheme and I can say the SMEs. So I consider a specific opportunity when we are talking about the food processing. I think that leveraging the synergy of the agriculture, MSMEs, and the rural economy. You can't take only one part of it because there is a value chain which you must leverage out. So agriculture, MSMEs, and rural economy. Agriculture will surely help India becoming Atmanirbhar, and is also important for employment generation. Let's understand that's going to be the key. Looking at the demography of the people, the employment generation is going to be crucial. No matter which government, which executive bureaucrats come into picture, they cannot ignore this. And this may lead to the establishment of agro-based MSMEs becoming a key driver in this process. So boost agro-based MSMEs by presenting these farm foods innovatively and to integrate them into the ecosystem of FMCG and the large food processing industry value chain. Because most of the global guys are present here. And our topography and the seasonal thing, it gives a much broader span of I would say the harvesting, which you don't get in a cold country or some other country. You can almost grow everything in every season here. So I'm very convinced about that. It needs the right attention and the right, I would say, attention for sure, but I think focus as well to a little bit both from the industry side and the last segment. I could say, I mean, we covered the food and we covered the solar PV and we covered the electronics. For me, I can see PLI scheme is definitely the second is the telecom and network.
Right.
If you look at the current PLI scheme for the telecom and networking, it aims to very clear underlining statement of this PLI for this sector to make India a global hub of manufacturing telecom equipment. Because the captive consumption of size and the size of population in the country, you can't do anything else but to put this vision yourself. So the political leadership and the executives have put the right focus on that. The scheme is investment linked, I mean, which will enable the vendors to invest into the backward integration. So thereby increase your value addition in the country. And the scheme has a special category for the MSME. For MSME, in fact, it is 1% higher incentive is proposed in the scheme. And I mean, I can see that if I track the reports recently, as I learned from the published reports recently, the Niti Aayog is working on a dedicated production links incentive scheme for MSMEs and to help their announce. In fact, I think the policy think tank is considering that the PLI scheme should be divided into two parts. So one for the largest bigger companies, and another one for the smaller one, which I think the need of the above. I'm sure it will come. It's a matter of time and the priorities for.
Right. I think very well, you've highlighted that very well, Sanjeebit, spoken about various sectors. If I may just add, I think you mentioned about the food processing, which is one important where there has been some announcements recently. And one of the, I think the scheme too speaks for the MSME, where actually, unlike the other PLI scheme where there is the factor of investment, here for the MSMEs, they have asked there is no investment criteria as such.
You're right.
And still they would get the benefit. So I think this is, and I quite agree with you, Sanjeebit. I think maybe the government should look at one part should be for the MSME and one part for the larger companies, because certainly the factor of investments that some of the PLI schemes talk about, like electronic sector, or you mentioned about the telecom sector also. I think these are some huge investments required, which MSMEs per se would not be in a position to fulfill. So I think maybe this is a good solution, what you have suggested, that the government should look at two aspects or two parts of the scheme for the sectors. Yeah.
And also, I think there is a inter-ministry coordination required. When I talk about, they're falling under three different ministries.
Yes.
If you talk about agriculture, MSME, and the rural economy, you need to pull them together, to stitch it together, the policy and the framework.
Right. Sanjeebit, perhaps coming to the last question for today is that on the startup ecosystem. Now, you especially have been very passionate about the startup ecosystem in our country, Sanjeebit. Do you think that startup ecosystem can support the manufacturing industry? And what role can a company like Weiss play? In fact, seeing your logo, I have also put on the black color tie today to to be in sync with your with the Weiss logo. And I know Weiss is quite passionate also. Mr. Weiss himself is very passionate about the MSME and the startup. So how do you feel, Sanjeebit, that the startup ecosystem relationship with the manufacturing, and how can it help each other?
Thanks, Rajat. Let me take it in two parts. One, to answering your question about the startup and the MSME part, and the second, what we have planned and how we can contribute in our small way, what we have planned for Weiss in India specific and also in Asian region. Now I'm working out between the Southeast Asian countries. There is a lot of similarity to that. For me, the magic word is digitalization.
Right.
the significant share of the Indian manufacturing sector, if whether we like it or not, is still in the post-electrification phase. I mean, imagine 99% of them are micro, employing fewer than 5 people or 10 people, 99% of that. So the unification of the physical systems to the cloud, the basic premises of Industry 4.0 digitalization is still at its infancy. Yeah, this is the one data point for us. Furthermore, the MSME segment has very little access to technology due to the so-called the perception of high cost barrier. And I think the fact is that the Industry 4.0 revolution, I'm talking about primarily the manufacturing of MSME manufacturing sector, will result in a new ways of developing the value and some novel business models as well. I mean, definitely Industry 4.0 will result in a new way of developing value, but also I'm very optimistic of this development being seriously embraced by the MSMEs in coming years, especially now with this backdrop of COVID-19 experience. All of us have, and especially this, if you say 60% of them are located in rural areas, it will change this revolution, change the supply chain, manufacturing, operations, and service of product, and the entire production ecosystem, in fact. I mean, the first thing, on a positive note, if you look at it, what is in a typical SWOT analysis, if I look at it, what is in for MSMEs or especially Indian, is the manufacturing sector, MSME, have an unprecedented chance to combine the availability of the advanced manufacturing technology with affordable labor to create an excellent competitive edge. I mean, the pandemic is a watershed moment for the MSME sector, for sure. I'm very sure about it. Has made it imperative that the MSME business to digitally reorient their workplaces, reimagine their business practices. In fact, and identify the right trajectory for the growth. I think it will be a thinking moment. The startups' roles in pushing MSMEs to the new height cannot be really downplayed. In fact, collaboration may be the game changer. The startups, most of them beaming with the technologies, primarily, if you know the startups, by definition today in India, if you look at the beaming with the technologies, have the potential to disrupt the market, and the collaboration between the startup and MSME can, I strongly feel it can be a game changer. But it is important that the innovation by the MSMEs need to go in every stage, procuring from raw material, manpower, undertaking the manufacturing, and the digital marketing. So I'm talking about the entire gamut. And the advanced tools such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain technologies can effectively implement it to refurbish their business model. Here comes the collaboration opportunity with the startups, which can augment the impact. In fact, a win-win situation for this. If I take a Google and KPMG recent study cited that is very important, and it was good input for me when I was looking at a opportunity, because I've been interacting off late a lot with the startups. A digitally empowered SME have about twice the revenue growth projections in comparison to offline SMEs. And we saw the figure, 68% don't have internet access. Imagine the context of that. The need of the hour is the industry stakeholders, the government policymakers, industry bodies, enterprises to work together to enable the digital empowerment of the MSMEs, which have been left behind, honestly. So Indian customers, I'm sure, are evolving rapidly, and so is their needs. And honestly, we at the Weiss Group, I have been involved for last 6-8 months with the group headquarters, with my core team of CFO, my CEO, and everything to put an Asia strategy and a manufacturing footprint. We are committed to take this challenge of providing value-added new products in line with our main market offer portfolio strategy, which we are looking at it. And our main focus is here is the application-driven innovation, because that's the key to delivering an affordable automation solution, which is technology enabled too. And this targeted to the region, especially India and Asian market. And we surely can excite and reach out to the much needed MSME sector with this. And I see also a great opportunity which I'm pursuing now to collaborate with the right startups in this direction. We have initiated investment and resources. I'm in fact in the process of, I have in principle approval. I'm in the process of looking at the investment sanctions. Very soon we will go for, we will be one of the guys, we'll be looking at the PLI scheme and to start a new manufacturing unit in India soon, and which can be not only for Indian market, for Asian and even required in the Western markets. And we have initiated the resource segment. I have already a COO, experienced COO on board, and still it will be our Chakan Pune site. The solution factory will be the base. In fact, Pune is already into the Weiss global map worldwide as our 4th global lead factories. And we are confident that by combining our global expertise of 50 plus years old in the different markets being present there and the deep industry and application knowledge will expedite the adoption of the local value-driven, innovative, application-driven solution. I mean, where it can translate into tangible product solution. We can't develop a, I would say, local value driver. We cannot bring it to an overseas design center. It's not worked out well. People who are in the ecosystem are the best people to develop a locally valued solution. If you want the value-driven concept to be given out. So I sincerely feel that in the coming years, our global knowledge of the automation industry, understanding of Asian and Indian customer needs across automotive and the general industry, and the combines with our 5 technologies portfolio will be valued. And I think it will be beneficial for the customers. And I will drive to make sure it reaches to the MSMEs, which can be technology enabled and with the digitalization. We don't need to be present. We need to reach out to the industry clusters, especially I'm looking at 60% plus are in the rural areas. Right. Thank you, Raj. I hope I've answered the questions.
Perfect. I think it's been a very knowledgeable session, Sanjeebit, and thanks a lot for sharing your vast experience, and one can feel your passion for the MSME sector and the startup sectors. And I think some of the statistics and data what you shared was really very, I think, really very useful for all our viewers. And so on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, Sanjeebit, wishing you as well as the Weiss Group a lot of success in your endeavors and initiatives in India. Very encouraging to know that you're also looking to reap the benefit from the PLI scheme and with the manufacturing setup. So I think this is a big step forward for Weiss's footprints in the Indian market or in the Asian market. And thank you also, Sanjeebit. You've always been very supportive of the VDMA activities in India. And again, wishing you and everyone in your team also, most important, stay safe in these difficult circumstances. Stay well and stay safe. And thank you very much, Sanjeebit.
Thank you, Rajesh. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.